one of the greatest mysteries in all of American history. True identity of D.B. Cooper is a mystery to this very day.
It's November 24th, 1971. Flight 305 is slicing through storm clouds over the Cascade Mountains when a man known only as Dan Cooper opens the rear stairs of the Boeing 727 and vanishes into the night with $200,000 in cash. No parachute was ever found, no trace for decades, but new evidence has changed that. Recent discoveries and forensic breakthroughs may finally reveal what happened to the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. history. Let's rewind to where this mystery began. The story starts in Portland. A quiet, well-dressed man in a dark suit and tie pays cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. Midway through the short flight, he passes a note to a flight attendant. He has a bomb. Calm but firm, he demands money and parachutes upon landing. The FBI delivers the ransom in Seattle, and the passengers are released unharmed. Cooper keeps several crew on board and instructs the pilots to fly south at low altitude. Flaps down and cabin depressurized. Somewhere over the dark wilderness near Mount St. Helens, he lowers the rear stairs and jumps into freezing rain and turbulence. Radar can't track him, and search teams the next day find nothing. No parachute, no gear, no footprints. The case consumes investigators worldwide. When a boy finds decaying bills matching Cooper's ransom money along the Columbia River in 1980, hope surges again. But that small clue deepens the riddle. For decades, the D.B. Cooper story becomes legend, symbolizing defiance and mystery until science begins to catch up. When the FBI officially closed its investigation in 2016, many assumed the trail had gone cold forever. But releasing their case files to the public sparked a wave of independent analysis, led not by agents but by engineers, chemists, and online researchers who refused to let it go. One artifact drew particular attention: the black tie Cooper left behind on his seat before the jump. Under modern microscopes, citizen scientists discovered tiny metallic particles embedded in the fabric. Rare metals, some used in the late 1960s by Boeing during aircraft production near Seattle. Titanium, stainless steel, and cerium, hardly dust from an average traveler. This clue reframed the theory. Cooper may not have been a random criminal, but someone familiar with aviation interiors or manufacturing. Researchers at the Citizen Sleuth Project used advanced electron microscopy to chart the particle distribution. They noticed consistent contamination that would have matched someone working on high-end aircraft parts or testing environments. One retired metallurgist commented that the specific combination of elements suggested late-stage production contamination, something likely encountered by engineers or managers rather than floor technicians. That insight reshaped the suspect pool almost overnight. Suddenly, the most credible theory wasn't an outlaw or drifter, but a professional insider. The FBI's declassified documents offered more breadcrumbs. Interviews that had gone nowhere in the 70s now made sense under new light. For instance, several Boeing employees known for parachuting hobbies and military backgrounds had surfaced early in the case, but were dropped for lack of proof. With the tie data, those discarded profiles looked very different. Machine learning programs analyzed decades-old witness sketches against staff photos from Boeing archives, producing correlations too close to ignore. Meanwhile, DNA technology also advanced. The original samples from the tie had degraded, but forensic experts revisited trace organic residues using next-generation sequencing. Although no full profile emerged, partial markers hinted at a male consistent with blood or skin material, proof Cooper handled the tie himself. Some independent labs compared those partial sequences to public genealogy databases, hoping for a familial connection. None definitive so far, but results narrowed viable suspects to a smaller circle than ever before. Outside the lab, persistence kept the search alive. Retired pilots, local journalists, and even descendants of early suspects continued piecing together fragments. One amateur investigator located previously unseen photos from the 1971 flight crew's debrief, revealing subtle details like the brand of Cooper's tie and sunglasses. Those specifics aligned with models sold primarily in technical supply stores, catering to aeronautic staff. It was circumstantial, but fitting too neatly to ignore. In recent years, digital reconstructions added another layer of progress. Using flight path simulations from declassified radar data and real-time weather modeling, independent teams recreated the night's conditions with remarkable precision. They concluded Cooper's jump zone was likely smaller than once believed, an area overlapping woodland that had suffered logging and landslides over time, explaining why search teams found no parachute debris. This refined model strengthened a theory that Cooper may have landed safely but injured, hiding in rugged terrain before succumbing to exposure. Others suspected he used his training to navigate out undetected. Throughout all this, the most compelling aspect wasn't just technology, it was collaboration. Scientists, retired law enforcement, and ordinary citizens united over decades without institutional funding, bound by curiosity. They shared data online, crowd-analyzed old photographs, and tested relevant fabric samples to compare fading rates and soil interactions. It became one of the earliest examples of open-source forensic investigation at a national scale. Every new clue seemed to lead back to one idea. Whoever Cooper was, he knew airplanes intimately. He understood flight mechanics, cabin pressure, navigation altitudes, all suggesting experience far beyond a thrill-seeker's impulse. And that realization pointed squarely toward a specific background, setting the stage for the biggest development yet. Identifying one suspect who, after 50 years, matched nearly every piece of the puzzle. For decades, the name D.B. Cooper floated through thousands of theories, but no single suspect ever fit everything. The skill, the timing, the evidence. That changed when researchers re-examined a man long dismissed. Robert Rackstraw, a former Army pilot with Vietnam experience and a tangled personal history that eerily matched Cooper's profile. Others had been rumored, like Sheridan Peterson, a Boeing engineer and smoke jumper, but it's Rackstraw whose story now aligns with the data drawn from Cooper's tie, flight path, and even the behavioral clues. Rackstraw's background reads like the blueprint of a man who could pull off the impossible. He was a helicopter pilot, parachutist, and explosives expert. After leaving the military, he floated through jobs tied to aviation and engineering, including work with aircraft parts that exposed him to titanium and specialized metals, the same ones discovered in those microscopic tie particles. He also once trained near the Pacific Northwest and was known for his calm under pressure. People who knew him described him as charming, brilliant, and unpredictable, all traits that matched witness impressions of the mysterious hijacker who smiled through an in-flight crime. When Rackstraw was first investigated in the late 1970s, the FBI noted his resemblance to Cooper sketches and his potential access to planes. But he had an alibi that couldn't be fully disproved or proven. Newly uncovered records show inconsistencies in that story and travel movements that might have placed him closer to Portland than previously thought. Even his reaction when reporters questioned him years later added fuel to suspicion. He never directly confessed, but he liked to toy with the mystery, saying things like, "Could have been me," in interviews followed by an ambiguous smile. Witness recollections further reinforce why some investigators keep returning to him. The flight attendants who dealt directly with Cooper described him as middle-aged, neatly dressed, polite but firm, with piercing eyes. Composite sketches align closely with Rackstraw's younger photographs, similar jawline, ears, and eyes. Investigators using modern AI facial comparison ran side-by-side simulations between known Rackstraw pictures and the composite, finding a statistical match closer than any previous candidate. Of course, technology can't translate personality, but it gives weight to the physical resemblance. Then there's the tie data. Forensics analyst Tom Kay and his team at the Citizen Sleuths discovered that specific alloys embedded in the tie, titanium, chromium, and aluminum, fit metal contaminants from aircraft testing in Boeing's development labs during the late 1960s. Rackstraw had studied advanced engineering and had sporadic connections to aerospace contractors around that period. If he handled similar equipment or worked near test sites, it could easily explain the contamination on Cooper's tie. That overlap between rare metal evidence and Rackstraw's technical background stands as one of the most concrete links in the entire case. Skeptics argue none of this proves anything. They point out gaps in the DNA data. The partial genetic profile from the tie could match thousands of men. Rackstraw's military service records don't place him at Boeing or even in Washington around the hijacking. Supporters counter that those records were incomplete, citing his history of identity games and even a period when he faked his death. His ability to create aliases made tracing his movements unreliable, which only strengthens the possibility that he could have disappeared right under investigation. The debate intensified after 2016, when a retired documentary filmmaker named Thomas Kolber gained access to declassified FBI reports. His team unearthed encrypted strings of letters within the hijackers' ransom notes and communications. They claimed the codes corresponded to Rackstraw's military unit identifiers from his Vietnam service. Linguistic experts were split. Some said the correlations were coincidence. Others called them compelling enough to merit re-examination. Either way, those patterns reignited attention and convinced many that the answer had been hiding in plain sight. Parallel theories still elevate Sheridan Peterson, the Boeing engineer and smoke jumper, who fit aspects of the aviation and parachuting profile, but steadfastly denied any involvement until his death in 2021. Peterson had indeed worked in Boeing facilities, likely contaminated with metals identical to those found on the tie, making him another equally plausible match. Yet he lacked any verified link to the ransom trace or suspicious financial patterns afterward. Rackstraw, on the other hand, had repeatedly used fake names, mysterious expenses, and a trail of deceptive stunts that suggested both thrill-seeking and misdirection. Traits Cooper displayed openly. What makes the modern breakthroughs compelling isn't just individual clues, it's how everything overlaps. The rare metals imply an engineering environment. The behavioral patterns suggest a seasoned flyer. The handwriting seen on airline paperwork appears consistent with Rackstraw's hand, at least according to forensic examiners hired privately after the FBI stepped back. And his instinct for evading authority mirrors that unforgettable leap into darkness 40 years earlier. Still, counter-arguments persist. Critics remind that no physical evidence conclusively ties Rackstraw or anyone to the scene. The money found on the Columbia River remains unexplained by all prevailing theories. If Cooper survived, where did the rest of the ransom go? Why did none of the bills circulate? DNA extraction has failed to close the case definitively, and officially, the FBI no longer pursues new suspects. But among independent researchers, consensus quietly forms. Rackstraw, or a close associate within that same aerospace niche, likely masterminded the hijacking. Psychological profiles drawn by modern analysts add to this conviction. Cooper's meticulous behavior aboard Flight 305, his polite tone, calculation of fuel burn, and command of aeronautical terminology matches a technically minded professional rather than a career criminal. That cool restraint, paired with precision timing, implies someone accustomed to stress. Rackstraw, decorated for military flight operations, matched that archetype perfectly. The fascination with D.B. Cooper always blurred lines between fact and legend. He wasn't just a fugitive. He became a symbol of rebellion, a man who outwitted the system without causing harm. Even now, discussions mix respect and suspicion, as if people want Cooper to be both villain and folk hero. But underneath the stories, data-driven analysis has turned a fading myth into a solvable puzzle. Every test, simulation, and newly opened file adds detail to the man behind that calm smile. And though no courtroom proof exists, many who've dedicated their lives to the mystery believe the case finally has a face and a name. If science and logic alone settled mysteries, D.B. Cooper's file might be closed by now. On paper, the overlap of metal particles, training history, and circumstantial links paints the most complete picture ever assembled. To several independent investigators, the puzzle feels solved in everything but official confirmation. Yet the FBI maintains silence. Since closing the case in 2016, their only stance is pragmatic. Too little physical evidence remains to meet federal standards of proof. Without a definitive DNA match of recovered gear, speculation can't transform into certainty. Still, technological advances continue tightening margins of doubt. Flight path data, once plotted with crude radar, now merges with atmospheric models to narrow the probable landing zone within a few miles. Soil sampling in that area occasionally yields mineral traces or textiles, possibly related to parachute material, though nothing verified beyond reasonable doubt. And when historians review the timeline, every factor, from Cooper's calm demeanor to his mechanical fluency, still points toward an insider steeped in aerospace culture. Experts often compare the D.B. Cooper investigation to cold cases revived decades later through DNA or digital reconstruction. It stands as a proof of concept. Even unsolved legends can evolve through persistence and science. But part of what keeps Cooper alive in the public imagination isn't resolution, it's resistance to it. The mystery persists precisely because it reflects our urge to find meaning where answers may never be absolute. Today, most agree that Rackstraw, or someone strikingly like him, fits the evidence better than anyone before. Yet the legend continues to hover between truth and myth, forever poised in midair, like the man who jumped into the storm and never looked back. More than 50 years after one man disappeared into the Cascades with a briefcase and a plan, we may finally stand on the edge of understanding what happened. Science has given investigators tools that didn't exist when the case began. Electron microscopes, genetic mapping, digital flight simulations. Each new method peels back another layer of what once seemed unreachable. Whether or not Robert Rackstraw, Sheridan Peterson, or another undiscovered name was behind the alias, the clues now align closer than ever before. The evidence may remain circumstantial, but the accumulated weight of it has redrawn the legend into something tangible. Even without an official confession, the story represents the power of persistence. Generations refuse to let the mystery die, using technology, curiosity, and collaboration to chase the truth through half a century. It's a reminder that unsolved cases often outlive the people who created them, becoming reflections of how far we'll go to find closure. Some mysteries remain because they define us more by the questions than the answers. So maybe the puzzle of D.B. Cooper isn't just about who jumped, but why we still care. Because every piece of evidence unearthed is really a piece of human determination. Proof that discovery never stops at the edge of impossibility. If you think the truth is finally within reach, share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to keep exploring the mysteries that still haunt history, subscribe and watch what's coming next.